Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 118 of the In a Nutshell podcast. I am your host, Sean Vowells. I've got Joe Meade with me, and tonight we're recapping Big Ten football week 10. Joe, not a ton of close games, but a few big ones with some real impact on what's going to happen here in the future. Big noon kickoff was in Columbus for what was supposed to be a really amazing game. Elite competition here at the beginning of the season. Didn't exactly turn out that way. At least for a half, though, Penn State battled. It was 17-14 Buckeyes at the break. Ohio State had a costly turnover that cost them a touchdown. But in the second half, it was back to business as usual. Ohio State 38, Penn State 14. Just another infinity stone for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, I thought Ohio State was particularly impressive in the passing game. I think a lot of people have kind of picked apart their I don't think inability is the right word. I think their not effectiveness running the ball is the phrase I describe, but kind of Joel Klatt was using a John Smoltz World Series reference that, they always have the out pitch, which is their passing game. And with Julian saying, I think their aerial attack is an improvement from last year, believe it or not, even with the absence of Will Howard and Emeka Egbuka, guys like G. Scott. I think Max Clare's really starting to come on, like I've been calling out all year. I think he was kind of the last gem in a way that could kind of really get that thing going. And, Cardell Tate deep balls, I think like they're 9 of 10 on those for the year of anything like over 25 plus aerial yards. And then obviously you have a Jeremiah Smith too to make ridiculous catches. So I think the Buckeye passing attack is easily the best in the country, and it gives their offense a consistent out pitch. Not that they'll really need it though in their next few games because the defense has been stout. And even though Penn State and Katron Allen, who's one of the better backs in the country, did move the ball running wise, I think Ethan Bruckmeyer missed a few throws, and ultimately Ohio State was going to make him beat them, and he was unable to do that. And I think the second half was very indicative of how we thought and most of the country thought how that game would go.
And Ohio State has fully not put the pedal to the metal this year. There's been some stats out there where if they keep at this rate of how many plays they're running per game, and Indiana does as well, Indiana's going to have like 75 more plays run by the end of the season. That's essentially another game. So, I think Ohio State tried to do that early on here. They made a costly mistake. They found themselves in a game, and then they turned it on in the second half. And the ease of their passing offense is really something that, saying is great, but it doesn't look like he has to work all that much. He throws a really nice deep ball. He hits his targets. He's accurate. He doesn't make mistakes. And he's got two first-round wide receivers with him, and if he puts it anywhere near them, they're going to come down with it. So, looks like Indianapolis might be the first time that we actually learn something about this Ohio State team. And Joe, the team most likely to join them there is Indiana. The number two Hoosiers go down to Maryland, and after a early interception, Maryland took a 3-0 lead, but after that, business as usual for the Hoosiers. Indiana 55, Maryland 10. Thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think this is just more of the same from Signetti. I call him the covering psychopath because, whenever there's an insane cover, with the exception of Michigan State this like 2 weeks ago, he's always very able to do that. Getting to the actual football portion of this, Sean, Maryland's ground game completely ineffective, and then, I think they asked Malik Washington to do a little too much, and frankly, he thought he had to do a little too much, and that's why you saw the interception right after the viral Signetti interview. And when
Yeah.
you give Indiana extra possessions, not only you're not going to win, you're not even come close to winning. And I think we saw that from Indiana's defense. I think more of the same for Fernando Mendoza, who I thought honestly probably didn't even play his best game. I just think he's so accurate and effective at times that it kind of gives their run game a break, which was also effective. Like, this is what's weird about this Indiana team. They could beat you so many ways offensively, and I think what does get talked about is the fact their running game is also really good, and I don't think they've necessarily garnered enough national praise for it because we saw yesterday that can be very effective as well. Even when Mendoza, who I think was still effective yesterday, even when he's not necessarily on his A game per se.
Yeah, but the defense in the running game is the biggest difference from last year. Their defense was sort of in the bend, don't break mindset last year. This year, they're coming for you. They're coming for the ball. They're going for tackles for loss. They're going for big negative plays. And I thought they made Malik Washington really work. He actually made a few really, really nice throws into some tight windows. And they gave up one touchdown, which should have been nullified by a tripping penalty. That's why the cornerback goes flying past the guy, because the blocker stuck out his leg. But to give up one touchdown and one that probably shouldn't have stood is a really good sign for this Hoosiers defense that was without the captain, Aiden Fisher. And then also on the other side of the ball, Indiana was down two receivers, Elijah Surratt and E.J. Williams. Both went out early in this one. So they decided to lean on the running game, and Maryland had no answers. Roman Hemby was able to get a touchdown against his former team. But, Joe, I think the wide receivers, and Mendoza is a little better than Rourke, but I think the passing game is pretty similar from last year. It's the defense and the running game for me that's taken a big step in why Indiana has a 2 next to their name rather than being a solid, 7-2 or 8-1 team right now. All right, Joe, let's go down to your team. Michigan Wolverines hosted Purdue, who's still looking for their first Big Ten win. It was a not the most offensively clean execution game, but it is the hat trick from Michigan. Jordan Marshall scores all 3 touchdowns as the Wolverines just get by Purdue 21-16, but had to be a little bit more nervous than you wanted to be there.
Yeah, I had to shut my door just so in case I go into a vitriol-filled rant, which I don't think is going to happen. Uh, probably the worst performance I've seen from Bryce Underwood thus far. I think Sean, we called out how against Michigan State Bryce couldn't have. JD Pickell calls it a gutter ball game. I just think like a true freshman game. This is Bryce's true freshman game. 2 turnovers in the red zone, 1 interception, 1 fumble that fell out of bounds in the end zone for a touchback. I mean, he's lucky this game was against Purdue. Let's call it what it is, Sean, because against anyone else outside of Central Michigan and New Mexico on the schedule, probably would have led to a huge upset and a season playoff ending upset for Michigan. I think Michigan in this game kind of won how they always have, just running the ball. I don't think that was that hard to do per se. I think they really tried to give Bryce in the passing game some momentum. Unfortunately, like with all the injuries, Donovan McCulley, Quinera, and then, you know, you have Evan Link out as well. I don't think this offense has really got into a rhythm the, honestly, since since the Nebraska game. Wisconsin, they struggled. USC, they did nothing. Washington, they needed 2 interceptions kind of to gain any sort of offensive momentum. And independent offensive momentum is kind of what Michigan's been lacking. So it's a very good time for the bye week. I do want to praise Purdue like we've been doing all year. This is a team that's going to go 2-10 that probably doesn't deserve it. I think Ryan Brown, when he has time, is really creative. I think their offensive play calling is very creative as well. I think they get their guys in a lot of open space and in positions to extend drives. I do think if a lot of this Purdue team does end up staying, they will be a lot better next year. And me and Shaw did call. We thought they were going to pick off someone. They came dang close to picking off a team no one really would have projected them to. I don't think anyone nationally projected this game close or didn't even project this game at all because they didn't think this game would be in any way close. But Michigan, they live to the bye week, and then they'll probably live to Wrigley Field. Sounds like Justice Haynes will be out until Ohio State, so I think they were kind of in survive mode yesterday, and luckily for them.
Yeah, this one was really, really alarming for Michigan for me, and it's just a team that, like, if they were going to find an offensive rhythm against anyone, it was going to be against this Purdue team. Marshall was awesome, but if he's the only running back until Ohio State, you're going to have a lot of, like, he's going to be taking a lot of hits. So can they find someone else? Can they get Underwood running a little more? I thought he looked okay. I mean, the mistakes were bad, but you might have to live with those. You're going to have to push him a little bit here to get to Ohio State at 9-2, and he's going to have to play really well in that game to win. So I think you might have to take the training wheels off a little bit here. Of course, they did, and it didn't work here, but yeah, a little bit alarming that they weren't able to put away Purdue at home here. And I think, Devin Mockabee was out for Purdue. If he's in there, he hits one explosive play. You could have found yourself on the wrong side of this one, but they survived and advanced, and Michigan is still alive for the college football playoff somehow. All right, Joe, let's move on to end this. It just froze right here, so let me reload the scores in. A team that had their college football playoff bubble burst, and another one that stayed alive out in Lincoln, Nebraska. It was Lincoln Riley and his USC Trojans going on the road looking for a big win over Dylan Raiola and the Cornhuskers. And in a game that was a little bit lower scoring than anybody thought, it's the Trojans that get out of there with a 21-17 victory. Nebraska takes their third loss of the year. Dylan Raiola breaks his fibula. He will be out for the season, but USC gets a big road win that they were looking for.
Yeah, I think this was probably the most devastating game of the Matt Rule era, to be honest with you, Sean. I think not only the long-term consequences of losing Rayola for the year, I think they had this game won. They start off really well, get up 14-6. I think the blackout crowd did a great job. The black balloons were outstanding to watch from a viewing perspective. And you feel like they have all the momentum. Jada Maeva, I think, goes 9 of 23. I have it in front of me here for 135 yards. I've said this Nebraska secondary's been good all year. I think they would dream of that going into this. It's just the consistent issue, Sean. They cannot defend the run. And I think after Michigan, we assumed they'd fix part of it. They haven't fixed it. Against USC, Michigan, and Minnesota, it's been the thing that's killed them. I think Jada Maeva, even though he was completely ineffective in the air, I think the running threat of him and then King Miller was, I mean, it's ultimately what carried USC to victory. But more importantly, Sean, this is just something Nebraska's going to have to, like, teams are going to continue to attack that, especially a UCLA who they have coming up next. And we're not going to go into the previews much on this episode. It's just really frustrating. And then for Emmett Johnson, for his night to end like that, I did kind of feel sick for him. I thought he played one of his best games as a Husker. And, to be honest with you, Sean, that game, once Raiola went out, I think we all kind of knew what was going to happen. This has been I don't even know what the streak is against top 25 teams. It's an absurd number now. This was a game I think Nebraska really had to win to show their fan base, especially after Rule's extension, that they're continuing to progress. I still think they're not ahead of schedule. I still think they're on schedule. Maybe you win this, you're probably a little ahead of schedule. But now with the Raiola injury and the way this thing ended and the lack of real offensive ability following that second TD, I really feel like this fan base might be pretty apathetic coming on these last 3 games they have. Apologies.
Yeah, the Rule extension. I mean, what a crazy week for Nebraska. They get good news that their coach is most likely not going to be leaving, and then on the weekend they lose their quarterback for the season, and they are at 6-3, so they will be going bowling. But at this point, Joe, it's going to be difficult for them going forward. And then for their defense, they took Maeva out of the game. I mean, had they done that, we would have thought they probably would have won by double digits, but they can't stop the run. They were able to get some run themselves, which they haven't done all the time this year, but just another big opportunity for them, and they come up short. Going back to last year, the Illinois game, this year the Michigan game, now this one, just you'd have to pick against them in big spots in the future, and chances are you're going to be right. All right, Joe, let's go out to Illinois. Rutgers 13, Illinois 35. A big bounce back for the Fighting Illini. They get to 6-3 and 3-3 in the Big Ten. Luke Altmaier throws for 4 touchdowns. He also runs for almost 100 and another touchdown himself. But a get-right spot here for the Illini, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, what I was most impressed with Shot is they made Rutgers, which we've suspected could have happened. They made them one-dimensional. I'll call myself out here. I really thought Rutgers was in the perfect upset position here. Uh, After Altmaier scored that kind of creative, that creative fourth and goal to make it 14-6, I thought the game was over. I think Rutgers kind of was on the verge of breaking defensively because their offense couldn't sustain drives since they're running. I think their rush attack averaged three or less per carry, and that's just not going to get it done when Athan Kaliakmanis has to drop back 45 times. And although I thought he played a pretty good game. Throwing 45 times against a Bielema defense isn't going to really do you any good. And I think Altmaier managed the game very well. Four TDs passing, did also have the one running. I think, we're starting to see he's a playmaker. I know he's been criticized a lot in their three losses, but in this game, he did prove he's not only a veteran, but he can be a playmaker as well. And I think Illinois going forward, you look at that remaining schedule, you think they could probably get to 9 wins and then a 10th in a bowl game. So I think this is probably Illinois' trap game in a way. Like I thought they could be caught looking, but they proved, Brett Bielema, who's obviously a mainstay in this league, and Luke Altmaier, uh, completely outstanding performance, I'd say. And, for Rutgers, I still think they can get to bowl eligibility, but they're going to have to be more they're going to have to be more creative on offense and definitely establish some semblance of a run game because without it, Antoine Raymond, 10 carries, 29 yards, that will never get it done in their last three remaining games.
Yep, Illinois needed it, they got it, and Rutgers is still sort of searching. They have the Big Ten win, but it's just they're not in far more games than they're in, and there's not really one reason for that either. So sort of a long way from the middle of the pack this Rutgers team is. All right, Joe, let's end the week up in Minnesota where PJ Fleck and the Golden Gophers get an overtime win over Michigan State, 23-20. Michigan State falls to 0-6 in Big Ten play. Minnesota to 4-2. Darius Taylor does not suit up for the Golden Gophers, and Jonathan Smith, after we recorded our preview episode last week, made a change at quarterback. Alessio Milihojevic was named the starter. Aiden Childs on the bench, and they almost came out of here with a win. Minnesota limps to a victory in overtime.
Yeah, I think the story of this game is what's been symbolic of Michigan State's season. I just think they leave too many points on the field. They don't get the fourth down conversion. They missed the field goal. That was like a 23-yarder. I almost still couldn't believe that. And frankly, I do want to call out the officiating here, Sean. I think the fact they picked up that flag in the first overtime on the first drive on that 3rd and 4 was pretty ridiculous. That like the other ref allegedly could, according to Jonathan Smith in his post game, the ref without the better view overruled the other seven. I have no idea how that worked. Regardless, Michigan State. The bottom line is on that 3rd and goal, even after they had I'd say decently questionable pass interference for Minnesota to get 1st and goal. On 3rd and goal, you had Drake Lindsey wrapped up. It was going to be 4th and goal from the 10. Minnesota probably sends this to a second overtime. They missed the tackle. Drake Lindsey breaks free and he scores. I think that's just more of the same for Michigan State, just missed opportunities. But to get back to Minnesota, Drake Lindsey, outstanding game. I know you look at the QBR, you look at the final stats, 26-39, nothing too crazy, but luckily for him, he did turn over the ball. I thought on the last drive, he was pretty fearless. He fit throws into tight windows to Lameek Rockington. I think that the last two drives, last two times we saw Minnesota, that's what we were probably expecting after that Nebraska performance. Luckily for them, they were playing an opponent that could not capitalize off their own mistakes. And, Minnesota, they were a team we thought would struggle for bowl eligibility. They're pretty ahead of schedule. 6 wins, 6-3 after 9. So you got to be feeling pretty good to get out of there alive if you're Minnesota, playing a pretty crappy game, I'd say. And for Michigan State, I mean, the reality is, Sean, they're staring 4-8 or 3-9 dead in the face. You got Penn State, you got at Iowa, and you got Maryland. I imagine they're around touchdown or more dogs in all those games. And I think the bright side is Alessio played really well. The harsh reality is, I don't know how well he was really going to do with this offensive line that's been failing to protect him and Aiden Childs all year.
Yeah, you get a decent game from your quarterback. You get over 100 yards from your running back. They had a chance to win this one, and they've had chances to win plenty of games. They've not come through, and then of course they've also gotten beat handily their fair amount of times too. But Joe, we are recording this Sunday night. I'm going to get this out right now. There has not been a change at coach yet for Michigan State. This Alessio move seemed like sort of a last stand type situation. You're going to have to bear with us here as the news, if it does come out, because it is not out right now yet. Jonathan Smith is still the coach of Michigan State. Potentially could change in the very near future. All right, Joe, that is all for Week 10 in the Big Ten. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.